Thinking of others will not only keep you from worrying about yourself, it will also help you make a lot of friends and have a lot of fun. How? Well, I once asked Professor William Lyon Phelps of Yale how he did it, and here's what he said. I never go into a hotel or a barber shop or a store without saying something agreeable to everyone I meet. I try to say something that treats them as an individual, not merely a cog in a machine. I sometimes compliment the girl who waits on me in the store by telling her how beautiful her eyes are or her hair. I'll ask a barber if he doesn't get tired standing on his feet all day. I'll ask him how he came to take up barbering, how long he's been at it, how many heads of hair he's cut. I'll help him figure it out. I find that taking an interest in people makes them beam with pleasure. I frequently shake hands with a redcap who's carried my grip. It gives him a new lift and freshens him up for the whole day. One extremely hot summer day, I went to a dining car of the New Haven Railway to have lunch. The crowded car was almost like a furnace, and the service was slow. When the steward finally got around to handing me the menu, I said, "The boys back there cooking in that hot kitchen certainly must be suffering today." The steward began to curse. His tones were bitter. At first I thought he was angry. "Good God Almighty," he exclaimed. "People come in here and complain about the food. They kick about the slow service and growl about the heat and the prices. I've listened to their criticism for 19 years, and you're the first person, the only person who's ever expressed any sympathy for the cooks back there in that boiling kitchen. I wish to God we had more passengers like you." The steward was astounded because I had thought of the cooks as human beings, and not merely as a cog in the organization of a great railway. What people want, continued Professor Phelps, is a little attention as human beings. When I meet a man on the street with a beautiful dog, I always comment on the dog's beauty. As I walk on and glance back over my shoulder, I frequently see the man petting and admiring the dog. My appreciation has renewed his appreciation. One time in England, I met a shepherd and expressed my sincere admiration for his big, intelligent sheepdog. I asked him to tell me how he trained the dog. As I walked away, I glanced back over my shoulder and saw the dog standing with his paws on the shepherd's shoulders, and the shepherd was petting him. By taking a little interest in the shepherd and his dog, I made the shepherd happy. I made the dog happy, and I made myself happy. Can you imagine a man who goes around shaking hands with porters and expressing sympathy for the cooks in the hot kitchen and telling people how much he admires their dogs? Can you imagine a man like that being sour and worried and needing the services of a psychiatrist? You can't, can you? No, of course not. A Chinese proverb puts it this way: "A bit of fragrance always clings to the hand that gives you roses." You didn't have to tell that to Billy Phelps of Yale. He knew it. He lived it. If you're a man, skip this paragraph. It won't interest you. It tells how a worried, unhappy girl got several men to propose to her. The girl who did that is a grandmother now. A few years ago, I spent the night in her and her husband's home. I'd been giving a lecture in her town, and the next morning she drove me about 50 miles to catch a train on the main line of the New York Central. We got to talking about winning friends, and she said, "Mr. Carnegie, I'm going to tell you something that I've never confessed to anyone before, not even to my husband." She told me that she'd been reared in a social register family in Philadelphia. "The tragedy of my girlhood and young womanhood," she said, "was our poverty. We could never entertain in the way the other girls in my social set entertained. My clothes were never of the best quality. I outgrew them, and they didn't fit, and they were often out of style. I was so humiliated, so ashamed, that I often cried myself to sleep. Finally, in sheer desperation, I hit upon the idea of always asking my partner at dinner parties to tell me about his experiences, his ideas, his plans for the future. I didn't ask these questions because I was especially interested in the answers. I did it solely to keep my partner from looking at my poor clothes. But a strange thing happened. As I listened to these young men talk and learned more about them, I really became interested in listening to what they had to say. I became so interested that I myself sometimes forgot about my clothes. But the astounding thing to me was this. Since I was a good listener and encouraged those boys to talk about themselves, I gave them happiness, and I gradually became the most popular girl in our social group, and 3 of these men proposed marriage to me. Some people who read this chapter are going to say, all this talk about getting interested in others is a lot of damn nonsense. Sheer religious pap. None of that stuff for me. I'm going to put money in my purse. I'm going to grab all I can get and grab it now, and to hell with the other dumb clucks. Well, if that's your opinion, you're entitled to it. But if you're right, then all the great philosophers and teachers since the beginning of recorded history, Jesus, Confucius, Buddha, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, St. Francis, were all wrong. But since you may sneer at the teachings of religious leaders, let's turn for advice to a couple of atheists. First, let's take the late A.E. Housman, professor at Cambridge University and one of the most distinguished scholars of his generation. In 1936, he gave an address at Cambridge University on the name and nature of poetry. In that address, he declared that the greatest truth ever uttered and the most profound moral discovery of all times were these words of Jesus. "He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it." We have heard preachers say that all our lives, but Housman was an atheist, a pessimist, a man who contemplated suicide, and yet he felt that the man who thought only of himself wouldn't get much out of life. He would be miserable. But the man who forgot himself in service to others would find the joy of living. If you're not impressed by what A.E. Housman said, let's turn for advice to the most distinguished American atheist of the 20th century, Theodore Dreiser. Dreiser ridiculed all religions as fairy tales and regarded life as a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Yet Dreiser advocated the one great principle that Jesus taught, service to others. If he, man, is expected to extract any joy out of his span, Dreiser said, he must think and plan to make things better not only for himself but for others, since joy for himself depends upon his joy in others and theirs in him. If we're going to make things better for others, as Dreiser advocated, let's be quick about it, time's a-wasting. I shall pass this way but once. Therefore any good that I can do, or any kindness that I can show, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. So, if you want to banish worry and cultivate peace and happiness, here's Rule 7. Forget yourself by becoming interested in others. Every day, do a good deed that will put a smile of joy on someone's face.